So this covers Project 4, the Typologies in Photography project. Typology is the collection of members of a common class or type. So photographic typology is when you would photograph the same type of thing in repetition in order to really focus on their minor and subtle differences. This lets people really think about how those little differences can say something about whatever the subject is. So you really need to start off with figuring out what type of subject you want to photograph, what interests you, what you have unique background on, and what will kind of show something when you photograph it through repetition. So details really matter with this, and you should plan out as much of the detail as you can before you go out and photograph in order to not have to rephotograph again and again. So trying to keep your height of your camera in relation to whatever subject you're photographing is, the angle of view, so keeping it, always pointed down or always pointed straight at it or up or whatnot. Your composition and framing, or your space around your subject. Your distance from you to the subject can really either distort or flatten things. Your focal length can have different effects on how you view things as well. The orientation of the camera being vertical, horizontal, and especially when it comes to having to crop or not cropping, or keeping a consistent crop, I guess I should say, as well as lighting and control of converging lines or other optical elements of your image. So to start, there's a history of this sort of type of photography that goes back to Germans, Bern and Hillebecker, who were active for much of the last 50 years. I believe they both have passed away in recent years. But for, I would say, the 1960s, 70s, 80s is when they really started developing their style. And Bern was a professor at the Dusseldorf Academy, which is a design and photography school in Germany. And he influenced, or I should say the pair of them, because they really were a team, influenced a generation or two of German photographers. So this is their work, photographing, and they photographed many different types of industrial forms, but I think the most known and maybe the most easy to connect to is their water tower series. And so the water towers are all different shapes and sizes, but they all have the same sort of function. And so in a large part, they have a similar design as well. The idea is to raise up the water tank to a high elevation, and that creates this sort of stable, repetitive form when you look at many of them. They all do have a little bit different design in these, but they're photographed, so they're always kind of center in the frame from a distance. They fill up similar amounts of the frame. The camera is actually elevated, usually on some scaffolding, to get about halfway up the height of the water tower. And they're usually photographed on a cloudy day so that you don't have really strong shadows that would distract. And then, of course, they're photographed in black and white because any color is sort of stripped out and doesn't distract. So they've also done many other things like gas spheres, or these homes on the countryside, I believe, in Europe. And they follow after another German photographer that sort of did the same thing but didn't intentionally set it up in a grid. They followed a little bit after August Sander, who did portraits of different classifications of people, being like a laborer versus a professional chef, or other types of maybe more servants, maybe not the right word, but customer service, maybe role, versus a professional like a doctor or a lawyer. And there's a variety of people throughout the world that have had kind of an influence by this type of photography. So Louis Baltz photographed these industrial or commercial warehouse buildings in Southern California. Daoud Bey, a Chicagoan, photographed these high school students, really looking at kind of their body language, and would include a narrative about them in a book that he published about all the people he photographed. John Cry photographed famous photographers developing trays for when photographers worked in the darkroom. Reneke Dijkstra, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, German photographer influenced by Bernard Hillebecker, really interested in body language and of kind of children as they are developing, hitting puberty, and their comfort with their body. So really looking at body language. Candida Hofer, another German directly influenced by Bernard Hillebecker. This is a series she did on libraries, where she would always photograph down the center of these very tall libraries, when they would usually have like a central corridor, so it's kind of halfway height up looking down the center. Richard Mizrak, this is actually his view of the Golden Gate Bridge from his backyard in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so the composition remains the same, but the weather significantly changes throughout these. Nicholas Nixon did this project photographing his wife and her three sisters at every family reunion for, I want to say, about 50 years now, but this is just a small grouping of it. So you can see as they age, their hairstyles and their clothing styles change. They're not so rigidly photographed, so they're exactly the same, if that makes sense. So sometimes they're kind of closer together or further from the camera. And I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think that they're always in the same order. Martin Parr, this is all what I think of as disgusting food photos that are kind of like what I see on Instagram these days, when people take pictures of their food all the time. Thomas Ruf, another German, directly influenced by Bernard Hillebecker, did these almost passport-like photos with these blank stares, but he printed them gigantics. They were like 4 feet tall, like twice the size of what these people were scaled in human life. So they almost become these godlike figures staring at you. Ed Ruscha, this is a book he made of every building on the Sunset Strip, just photographing going down the street every, 20 feet or whatever, and taking a photo and then stitching them together, essentially. So a little bit more humorous, but kind of doing a repetitive thing. Mark Rudval photographed abandoned trail lines throughout the American West. So you can see the mountains where the train lines went, or these are cuts through the mountains, or even tunnels. Paul Shambroom did this project photographing small governmental seats of power, essentially, like small government, like a village, a park district board, or some of them are more formal than others, but they're very small municipal types of government. Hiroshi Sugimoto, this is one of my favorite photographers, did this project photographing movie theaters, most of them being older theaters that were converted to be movie theaters. And he would set up his camera underneath the projection booth and photograph for the full length of a movie. The movie theaters are usually empty, but they're basically lit only by the light that reflects off the screen and fills back into the theater. So some of them are very intricately, detailed. Yeah, he also did some drive-in theaters outdoors at night, but I don't have any of those images. Susan Barnett did this project photographing t-shirts. So this is like a spread of 2 pages that are just black t-shirt, white text. And you can imagine that there'd be hundreds of different combinations of colors of t-shirt with different colors of text, but all just kind of photographing what the words say on the back of them. David Schokol did this project called the Isolated Buildings Project. And that was here in Chicago. And he's really looking at depopulation happening particularly because of white flight to the suburbs. And so a lot of buildings would end up being essentially abandoned and then torn down. And that's what causes the isolated building. But in his artist talk that I'll have you watch, he really goes into a lot more detail about why this interests him and his background as a sociologist and how he uses photographs to talk about sociology. So I'll link this in separately. And then here are some student examples of items going through an x-ray machine, hairstyles, planes, shovels, fire hydrants, grills in parks, doorknobs, doors, windows at night, benches, coffee mugs, breakfast food items, car tires, duplexes where you can see the differences on one side versus the other, even though they're all photographed originally being the same structure. Ceiling fans, cameras, what do you call it? Chicken wing like festival, cigarette butts, detention slips, clocks. This student had a background in like different like stage makeup and that sort of stuff. Sculptures, donut or bagels. This is a student who photographed every car that almost hit him on his bike ride to and from campus. Lego minifigures, little bird figurines. This is a lot of shops. I believe the student said it was down Devon, where a lot of the shop windows are lit by LEDs. Clothing styles, stop signs paired with other signage. This was all trees that had been carved into in some way, although at this scale I think you can only see the center one. Six-way corners. Political kind of response. This was back during the pandemic. Garage doors. A cabinet of curiosity objects. Skateboards. Golf balls. Mexican-American jewelry. Again, during the pandemic, October. Pills, thinking about medication and mental health, I believe. Recycling. Other jewelry. Album covers. Siblings. So it was someone that this person knew well and paired with their sibling. Hats. Shoes. So a lot of people have done hats and shoes, and I might avoid that. Oh, more shoes. Shot glasses. These are all houses displaying an American flag, although I would say a bit more consistency would help. Dorm room picture, like pictures of someone's dorm from the doorway. A lot more consistency in how they were composed would probably help. And the crop. Hands and thinking about aging. Succulents. These are all a student's family members, like the couples throughout their family. Corners of buildings. Sunglasses. This was all different bridges across the expressway, I'm trying to remember what the significance of each bridge was, but they found that it was really hard to photograph because most of them had fences. Michael Jackson videos played on a TV screen with a long exposure. All right, and then compositionally for all of these, when you go out and photograph, you want to try to keep as much consistent as possible. So here's an example I put on the back of my camera where I put a piece of plastic over it, taped it onto the camera, and I drew a circle for like the head and shoulders. And that way I could, compositionally try to match up when I'm taking my pictures and have it on live view to keep the same, everything in that same composition. So if I was photographing Christopher Walken, I might put marks for where the side of the head, the top of the head, the bottom of the head should all line up, or even the eyes. Or if I'm photographing a building, this is one of the isolated buildings again, I could draw where the bottom of the frame, or like bottom of the building is, the left and the right side of the building, and where the horizon line should go. And of course, the building's height will probably change, but having at least something like this consistent would help. All right, so the real goal here would be don't just go out and photograph something boring. Go out and photograph something that you can say something unique about. So think about issues related to race, income disparity, gender, sexual identity, climate change, immigration status, mental illness, gun violence, body image or weight, criminal justice reform, drug epidemics, policy reform, access to health care, education inequality, student loan debt, religion. Go wild with it, but this is the project in the entire semester where you can really try to say something unique. And in order to really get a good, an A on this project, you need to try to be saying something unique with the work that you're doing. And that is all.